have a special guest with me in studio. This is not only a personal friend of mine, but he was also a coach and teacher, mentor. My daughter likes to tease that he was her blather. He is her black father when she was in school. It's a very endearing name that he holds true to his heart. But his name is Cedric Benson. So I'd like to welcome you to the show today, Cedric.
Thank you for having me.
We've kind of talked about this before, and I need to kind of get this out of the way because I don't want to stumble on it once we get going. But I'm so used to calling you Mr. Benson for so many years that calling you Cedric is new for me.
I know.
So as much as I do consider you a friend, that is a little bit of a struggle for me. So I've got to get over it. I got to mentally jump over that. So
the next hour or so, I'm Cedric.
You're Cedric. Okay, I'll go back to calling you Mr. Benson when we're done. But we have a great subject to talk about today. I'm really excited about it. It's not an easy subject. This, to me, can be a very sensitive subject for people. But I want us to hit it from as many angles as we have time to do today, knowing that people are looking for answers, they're looking for help, or they're maybe looking for some guidance in course correction. And we can do that no matter what station we're in. We can always make a course correction if we're on the wrong path. We're not stuck where we are, no matter what we seem to think. But if we're also on that road and maybe have some questions what that looks like, and getting others' opinions is always a way to gain wisdom and know how to move forward. So
absolutely,
I'm excited to have you today, knowing you've got some wisdom to give to us today. Before we jump in, though, I want to make sure you are also what's the right term? You are a
a content creator, a YouTuber, whatever you want to say. But my good friend of mine, Brian Heller, we have a podcast or YouTube called Cedric and Brian. And we're not the smartest individuals. It took us an hour to come up with that name. Like, why don't we use our first names? So after 2 hours of that, we started filming our first one. So it's called Cedric and Brian. If anybody wants to look at someone on YouTube and give us a follow, we basically talk about social commentary that's going on in the world today. Mm-hmm. And we try and add a little common sense to what's going on. But that's common sense based from our perspective.
Right. Though you've been very fair. I've watched the program. I do encourage people to go ahead and subscribe to your channel and be able to participate in the conversation. You do invite whatever comments and thoughts that people have.
Absolutely.
You're very inclusive. You're not at all exclusive in your conversation. You really do state where you're coming from so that people can understand why you take the stance you do, or what the reason you think what you think. So
right.
I think that's great.
Right.
It's also entertaining. You're kind of my Cedric the entertainer. So
yes, absolutely. Minus dropped a few pounds.
Yes, you look really good.
It was fun for Brian. I know and you'll probably touch on the subject today. We're going to talk about being men.
Right.
But it was just good for Brian and I as two men. And people who haven't watched it yet, Brian being a white man and me being a black man. And last year during 2020, the world, there was so much discourse.
Right.
And then you have this black guy and this white guy who are together and they're friends and they're talking about what's going on in the world. And people are like, that's not supposed to happen.
Right.
And Brian's like, yeah, it can. Now, do we get on each other's nerves? Absolutely. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we're friends, and we're Christians, and we try and do God's will.
Yeah. And you've been friends for a long time.
Been friends for a long time.
Yeah. Which I love, because that's the proof in the pudding right there.
Yes.
That this relationship has gone through seasons and time, just like everything else. So
don't know if people are being comical, but they make the comments like, my goodness, you guys look alike. Like, we haven't been friends that long. You're just not paying attention.
Exactly. Well, let's go ahead and dive into this subject, starting with humor. I'm putting on the glasses so I can read my notes, but we had talked about this a little bit before, and my heart was really to just have a conversation about this and to be able to maybe help some people today. I don't know that it's so much that they are unaware of what the issue is, but maybe don't know what to do with the issue. So if at all possible, we might be able to lend a hand, something new to think about, another way to come at it.
Right.
And the title is this: Where Have All the Men Gone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I know when you broached the subject to me and said, let's talk about something, for some reason that was just tapping on my heart. like we need to do a discussion about where have all the men gone, because society has really redefined the role of men, and we've allowed them to do that. And we've taken away the biblical worldview definition of men, and we contorted and twisted into something that it wasn't intended to be.
Right. And from your perspective, what is that role? What do you think that encompasses?
Well, first and foremost, to have a biblical worldview, you're not really a man unless you're following God. And I've told my kids this, I've told my students this, like, oh, Mr. Benson, I want to be like you. I'm like, oh no, you have got to have bigger goals than that. Because if I'm your barometer, I'm going to fail you. Do I mean to? Is that my intention? Absolutely not. But I'm fallen. I'm sinful. I have issues. But
as we all do.
If you go past me and you look at Jesus Christ and you look at God as the barometer for what a man should be, you can't go wrong.
Right. That's good. I even was listening. I was mentioning earlier to you that I was watching a re-showing, I guess, on YouTube. So anybody out there who's curious can watch. But it was T.D. Jakes ministering from his church on Father's Day. And that discussion of what that role looks like came up, but it wasn't necessarily a personality thing. You know, you can have one in the house who's got the strong, domineering way about them, or the disciplinarian. And then you have, on the other hand, the person who is the nurturer, the one who's kind of more grace giving. And he said, you kind of have.
You just described my mom and dad.
Yeah. And that's the way it was in my house too. We had the grace giver and we had the lawgiver, and both of them together produce great results. But if you are outweighed in one side or lacking completely in the other, that missing part is something you tend to go searching for in other relationships.
Exactly.
To fill that place. But if you know, as someone who follows Christ, that his way was both of those. He showed us both of those sides. He was the one who was strong, fearless, able to do what seems to our flesh person impossible, to lay down our life for the unjust, to take on someone else's just punishment. That takes a strength that he even himself struggled with up until the last moment, of laying himself down to do that. That's incredible strength. And he was also the one saying, I didn't come to do away with law. I came to fulfill the law. So he was also about, if you love me, you'll follow my commandments. So there was the law to be watched, to be had and to be followed. But at the same time, he was giving the most mercy, the most grace,
absolutely,
the most covering that you could have. What was hilarious to me was the example that T.D. Jakes used, was that if you could have the father come in, and he used the kind of typical roles, but he used the father comes in and says, what are you doing still asleep? Get out of that bed. You got to get something done. You got, and barking the orders, and the person gets up, and as they come down, mom's in the kitchen, I'm making you some breakfast.
Right.
It's a hilarious picture to me, but it's true.
Well, I laughed today. Like, a lot of my friends said they got like a counting, like parents would count like 1, 2. My dad didn't count.
Right.
Don't I get a second chance? He's like, no, I told you what I expect. You do it. And I heard similar to T.D. Jakes. There was a great pastor in Tennessee, Bobby Harrington, and he gave a great acronym for men, because we always use this term, real men. What's a real man, and what's to expect? And he took the letters real and had a great acrostic for it. And he said the R stands for a man who rejects passivity. You just, and in today's culture, that is so hard, because we're taught to be, what are some of the buzzwords to tolerate,
right,
and to include and like that. It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with standing up and saying, you know what, this is wrong. And as a man, especially as a father, it's up to us to teach our children and our students what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong.
Right.
And I love what Jesus says when he meets with Pontius Pilate. And Pontius is he's kind of torn, like, okay, what do I do with this? I don't want to be responsible for this. At the same time, I got to please the crowd. And Pontius asked him, like, you're a king then? And Jesus said, that's what you said. You said I'm a king. And he said, well, why are you here? He said, I came for one reason, and for one reason only. And that's to testify to the truth. And in that language, and I don't like when people say, well, I'm living my truth.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as your truth.
Yeah.
There's the truth,
Right.
and then there's a lie.
Right.
And there's no other area between that.
Right.
So first and foremost, I love what Bobby Harrington says. And he says, reject passivity, be strong, and you can do that without being a jerk.
Right. Right.
You can be strong. Like I said, me and my friend Brian, we have that thing on. He's a jerk. I love him, but he just has a different way with people than I do.
Yeah.
And then he
Dr.
said,
Heller.
right, yeah, Dr. Heller, Mr. Benson, Dr. Heller.
Yes.
We're Cedric and Brian. Okay. And then he said the E stands for you expect God's great reward. And not that you do things because you're expecting the reward, but you do things that at the end of the day, whether you die a multi-millionaire or you don't, the fact that you stood by the truth and then you invested in people and you loved God first and you treated others with respect, that is going to be your great reward.
Right.
And then in the A, he says they accept responsibility. And I thought that was, it's incredible how simple statements carry the most impact.
Right.
Just accept responsibility. When I had your son on basketball, Isaac, one of the terms in basketball people say is like, my bad.
Yeah.
My bad. Bad pass, bad shot. But accept the responsibility, learn from it, don't keep repeating it, and move on from there.
Right.
And then the last part was the L. He said they lead courageously. And that was impactful for me having my own kids and having students. It's like they're looking to me to make the right decisions. It's our barometer for making decisions can be based on what dad does.
Right.
And for lack of a better phrase, if dad punks out and makes poor decisions, chances are we're going to do it.
Right.
And so and my kids have come to me and it's like, you know what, we appreciate what you do with your channel and what you say with stuff, because they read the hatred and then they read the comments, but I have to lead courageously in order to create that lineage in my family and to keep that going for generations down the road.
Right. Well, and we can probably even talk about each of those letters, the acronym, and kind of discuss those a bit. But we're talking from a standpoint of that there's an actual dad in the home to do those things.
Yes.
I would love for you to kind of just share with us your story of having your dad, your cousin, who didn't have necessarily dad in the house the way you did.
Right.
Because people tend to listen better when they realize that you have some experience with this. Right. And you were blessed to have a dad in the home. I was blessed to have a dad in the home, but you lived with a situation that showed you what it was like not to have that.
Exactly. Well, to draw the parallels, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born in 1960. You guys caught that. And in Los Angeles, which at the time, and I was blessed to be in an area where I was born in West LA, where 8 miles west, I was in Brentwood, Santa Monica, 8 miles east, I'm in South Central Watts. Right. But I'm right in the middle there. And you and I talked about this over coffee about 2 weeks ago. My sister loves to tease me when I was the firstborn, but I wasn't planned.
Yes.
So draw from that what you will. But my dad took it upon himself to stay. And he said it crossed his mind to leave because it could have been very easy. And I don't want to get too deep into this, but the welfare system in the late 60s made it very easy for all women, especially Black women, to negate the man in the house and say, you know what, as long as the government's taking care of me and my kids, I don't need a man in the house. And that not only affected Black families, but affected families all across the board. Right. But my dad said he had this feeling that he was going to have a son and he wanted to be around for them. Contrasted with his brother, my uncle, and me and my cousin were exactly 3 months apart. My birthday is June 3rd. My cousin's birthday is March 3rd. And we were as thick as thieves. Yeah. We always looked for opportunities to hang out together, but his dad wasn't in the home. He was out and about, kind of carousing. The old Temptation song, Papa was a Rolling Stone. Yeah. That was kind of his MO in life. And as me and my cousin talked about it, he spent 30 years in jail. And I'll jump ahead a few years. When he was 16, he was involved in a robbery. Someone was killed. Wow. He did not pull the trigger, but he ended up doing 30 years in jail. And since he's been out, we've spent some time together. We've talked, and very similar to Paul, like spending time in prison has made him a better man. Wow. And it's just weird. Like he has so much wisdom to offer. I'm thinking, when did you get intelligent? When did this happen? He goes, I know, right? He says, it's a darn shame. I had to go to jail to figure this out.
Right.
But we talked about it. He goes, I see. If you remember, Cedric, I was always looking for opportunities to spend the night at your house and to be there and to be around that structure and to be around my dad. And he loved being disciplined by my dad. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't like this super discussion. It's like my dad said this. That was it.
Right.
So he went to jail. He spent some time there. Now, being around, I used to run around with my cousin, but I had the term respect. I had a fear of my dad.
Right.
I didn't cower.
Right.
I didn't shake. It wasn't like, oh no, Dad, please don't.
Right.
But I had a very healthy respect for the man that I wouldn't go against anything he said.
Yes.
And my cousin running around with people like that, he said, well, you have the Crips and the Bloods. I said, there is nothing that a Crip or a Blood could do
that my daddy
that intimidates me more than what this man will do to me.
Yeah.
I said, I'll take the beating from you guys. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And so it was important for me it was very, looking back on having my dad in the house. And he never read a lot of Dr. Dobson books. Mm-hmm. He just had this innate ability to parent and to parent a son. Yeah. And say, I'm going to make you accountable for your mistakes. I'm going to hold you accountable for things. Your word is bond. Right. If you say you're going to do something, do something. And like I told you today, I'd be here my dad told me, if you tell someone you're going to be there at 1:00 and you get there at 1:03, you're a liar. Mm. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be a liar. Yeah. Yeah. I said, that's deep, Dad. I mean, we live in LA and we don't measure stuff by miles. We measure it by time. He said, don't leave 2 hours early. But if you say you're going to do something, do it. Yeah. And if you make a mistake, own up to it and move on from there. He was great. He taught me things that he learned from the Army. And he's a leader now to this day. I still go to him for advice because the first Saturday of each month, before COVID shut everything down, and we're getting back to the point now we're opening things up, for the last 12 or 13 years, we would meet for breakfast. Oh. And it was like that relationship now of not being father and son, but being friends. Yeah. And to be able to talk to him, and I still come to him for advice. And what kind of tugs at my heartstrings a little bit is that my son, who's 24, is getting married next summer. And just last Friday, he goes, hey, Dad, can we get together and just talk? My first question is, are you buying? So if you're buying, come on, let's go.
I'll eat with you, right. Sure.
I paid.
Of course.
But the fact we're getting together and talking about how he wants to be a good husband, right, and he wants to be a good father. And I'm thinking, well, shoot, this is on me because he's coming to me for advice. Yeah. And of course, if I don't get my advice from the source, right, this doesn't mean anything. Right. Did I answer your question or did I talk around it? I have a tendency to babble.
No, I do too. So we'll have fun babbling. We'll be a wonderful babbling brook today.
All right.
You did. I do want you though to go back and tell the story that it's quick, it's short, and not that it has to be if there's more to tell, but how your cousin would sneak a backpack into his car.
Yes. And our house was, back in those days growing up, I had a lot of cousins. Yeah. And so they come over for Thanksgiving or Christmas or the 4th of July. My cousin would, because the excuse for why your cousin or your friend couldn't spend the night was what? You don't have a toothbrush, you don't have clothes. Right. My cousin's like, if I happen to have a backpack in the back of the car that no one knows that has clothes in it and a toothbrush, right, that excuse is gone.
Stop me, yeah.
And so we would go there and we would work on our story. We'd be in the bedroom. Okay, I'll say this, and then you say this. You have your lines memorized. Okay, get the sad, pitiful, pathetic eyes. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Oh, father and mother dearest. Yes. Is it possible that Robert could spend it? Yeah. And they would say no, and like, you don't have any clothes. It's like, but I do. So I guess I can spend the night. And he just, and it's hard to articulate what you're feeling at that age. Right. But now that he's been out of jail, we have a chance to talk. He said, I needed to be around that because I didn't have that structure at my house. Right.
And you and I talked about that there's an innate need in a child, whether they recognize it, because most of them don't recognize it, just like you said, till they've grown and they can appreciate what they had and know why they had it. But as a child in that development time, you just know you have a need. There's something pulling at you. There's something you want or desire. You may not know why, but you just have it. Right. And for him, a desire was, I don't have a dad at home. Having a dad at home kind of represented that safety, security. There's a strong man in charge who's going to protect us and take charge.
Right.
I mean, for him to say to you that he liked having your father's correction, discipline, whatever the rules were, he knew what road to take because it was paved for him. It wasn't something he had to figure out on his own. I think we both talked about this particular scripture. And what struck me, this one's in Proverbs 13, verse 24. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. And you would think that most people kind of cringe. They hear the phrase, the rod, meaning a spanking of some sort. You're going to be punished for your bad behavior or disobedience. In God's eyes, it's all rebellion. So disobedience is rebellion. So you're saying, no, I don't want to be corrected, not realizing that by pushing on any authority that wants what's good for you is desiring hurt for yourself. So he tells us that then you hate your children if you don't want to discipline them.
Right.
Because then you don't want to protect them. Right. You don't want to help them get where they're supposed to go. Well, of course you do. But in order to do that, in order to produce that, I can't just be the mercy giver 24/7. I've also got to discipline. I've also got to take that stand and teach my child. It says, for those who love their children, care enough to discipline them. But then there's also, let me find which one. I have stuff all out of order here. Forgive me. And then Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go.
Yes.
We read that scripture. We know that scripture. Most of us in church have heard that scripture, train up a child in the way he should go. And when they're old, they won't depart from it. There's a couple things there, because to train it up is not given to the mother. It doesn't say, moms, train up your children, right? Train up your children is probably going to take both of you. It's going to take that strong discipline, a strong character, someone who says there is a right, there is a wrong, there is a way to do this. There is a right way, there is truth versus just whatever, is out there. And then not only is there a way, but I am to train you in that way, knowing that you may not get it in the middle season. It says when you're old, you won't depart from it. There's a season in there that a lot of us will waste some time, hopefully not some years, but it could be some years. It could be a lot of years. And then finally the light bulb goes on and think, Mom and Dad was right. They were right about this. Right. Or the situation that I rebelled against, whether it was in school and learning and being disciplined as a person, or whatever those things are, that there comes a point in our life, if someone dedicated the time, if somebody made the deposit, if somebody actually did the work, whether you listened or not, the promise of Scripture is that there will come a point in that person's life that they will turn back to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you and I have both experienced this being parents, and that's why it's so important to have a village around, and then the association, because there have been times where from birth to whatever age, I've told my kids something a million times and they don't get it. You come along and you say the exact same thing, and then the light bulb goes like, I've never heard that. Like, yes, you have. I've told you a million times. But having people, but like you said, you start planting those seeds. And like I always like to say, is like sometimes you make your deposits in the South Bank, but you make your withdrawals in the North Bank. Right. You don't know when it's going to happen, what season it's going to happen, what chapter in the life it's going to happen. But it will happen if you're consistent, persistent, and what you're doing and what you're teaching. Right. And my dad was a sparing the rod. Yeah. And I was spanked. Yeah, I was too. And I'm actually grateful for it. Yeah. But, yeah. But I always clarify, because like I was never beat. Right. Neither was I. It was a huge difference. And I deserved looking back, I deserved every single spanking I got. And there were some things that I got away with that if I told my dad right now, he'd probably spank me. Yeah. And I would deserve it. Yeah. But I think a lot of Christians and a lot of other people, they look at the word discipline as a negative connotation. Right. When discipline is nothing more than training. Right. And how bad would our military be, our Army and our Navy and our Air Force, if they weren't trained, if they weren't disciplined? And then, like you just said so eloquently, it's like if you don't care for your children, go and do whatever. Right. So my parents trained me not to run into the middle of the street. Right. And I hear so today in this culture is like, well, you gotta let kids kind of find their way. I was like, do you know how silly kids are?
Right.
And then they have the mind capacity of a flea.
Right.
You have to tell them what you want. And if you abdicate that authority, if you don't do it, radio's going to do it, TV's going to do it,
right,
the movie's going to do it. So you better do it.
Right. And you probably aren't going to like what you get. This it's sad to me that we think that being a good parent or being merciful when the child needs discipline, somehow that we've allowed outside influences. And I honestly think the reason we've allowed those outside influences is because there has been the statistics are 1 in every 4 does not have a father in the home. Mm-hmm. And that's across all racial. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the parameters are. That's in total. It actually gets far worse when you break down each race.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the statistics actually says that up to 75%.
75% of Black families do not have a father in the home.
Yes. And I mean, that's the thought of that is incredible, that only 1/4. So you have an entire cultural dynamic happening where it is more normal in your mind. That's the norm. So you don't question so much the norms. And to me, that's the problem.
Right.
We don't question if the majority is doing something, whether that's right what they're doing, because the majority is doing it. That is exactly how a teenager comes to their parents with their want to list.
Right.
But everybody's doing it. I mean, and then of course, what does mom say or dad say? So if they jump off a bridge, are you going to do
a scary question nowadays because most kids will do it.
Yeah. And that is the. It's a shame because you mentioned in that acronym that we have to take the responsibility. We have to become accountable.
Yes.
And if we're not accountable, we have left, not only are we not disciplined, and I love the word discipline because it actually does mean training. It means being a disciple. If you look at it in Christian terms, to be a disciple meant you were the disciplined ones.
Yep.
You were the ones who walked with him every day. You had your meals with him every day.
Right.
You took the instruction every day. You did what you were commanded to do. And he would turn to those and say, follow me. What does that mean? Come be my disciple.
Yes.
Come do what I do, say what I say, act the way I act. Let me teach you how to do this. So to further cut down how this looks and to go a little bit further down the rabbit hole, our society has a problem with not having men be men in the family, in the workplace, in the, even in play. Like I had someone say, and I laughed, and I think you and I even talked about this, like you and Brian are friends. Right. You're partners in business, right? I mean, this is what you do.
Right.
But you can't say the name partner. This is my partner, because people then think you're in a gay relationship.
Exactly. We get that a lot too. Like,
yeah. And I mean, and here you are, friends. Your buddies, your friends, your pals, you do stuff together constantly. This is your friend.
Yeah.
We have taken, by blurring the lines and saying you don't need a dad in the house, by blurring the lines and saying, no, everything's okay. Throw the child into the street and let them find out once they get hit, oh, you shouldn't be in the street.
Right.
Let them find out. Let them take all the drugs and hang out with the friends. Go ahead, buy the beer at the party for them, because they got to learn, right? I mean, the minute we take that position and blur all of those lines, we've now told them this is normal and this behavior's okay.
Right.
So then when their world falls apart, they're now more confused than ever.
Right.
And don't know where to go and don't know where to turn, because nobody has stood for an absolute. No one has told them that it can look different. It can be different. This isn't normal. Now, your home normal may look different than my home normal, but the boundaries are very similar.
What I call non-negotiables.
Yeah.
There'll be some slight differences, but every family, every relationship has some non-negotiables. We're not going to cross this line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I always make back to you saying about me and Brian being friends for 20 years, and people always say, well, you're not gay? I'm like, I always give a 2-part response.
Yeah.
Number 1, no, I'm not gay.
Yeah.
Number 2, if I was, I could do better than Brian. So I mean, give me some credit. My goodness, jeez. But yeah, it's like I said, like 75% of homes today don't have a father, and contrast that with even as a Black man back in slavery times, mothers and fathers were a unit until they were separated. So even in the late 60s, early 60s, before the welfare system destroyed the family unit, it was only like 23% of families didn't have a dad in the home. It was just an anomaly, not for dad to be there. But then, and you and I talked about this over coffee last week. We're looking at some of our movies and TV shows nowadays, and you look at you've left the days of Howard Cunningham, of Happy Days, and Father Knows Best, And this is so hard for me. I have to separate Dr. Heathcliff Huxtable from Bill Cosby,
I know
the Cosby Show in the early '80s, and then that's been replaced with Al Bundy from Married with Children, and Homer Simpson, and the Family Guy, and things like that, And so women and children even are looking at this and saying, "This is the role model." These are the leaders. These are the people I'm supposed to follow. They're buffoons. They're idiots. And then when you don't have that dad in home, and I forget the statistics, and I'll have to look them up. Forgive if I don't get them right. But if you don't have a father in the home, they say like 5% of students will remain poor, 9% will drop out of school, and 22% will be incarcerated. And I've seen it in my own life with me and my cousin. And I'm not saying that I would have been incarcerated had my dad not been around, but there's a great quote that Denzel Washington said. It said, "If there isn't a father in the home, a child will look for one in the streets." He will find it. And so if that family isn't there, he'll go out and he'll make the gang his family. He'll make the people that are running roughshod around the neighborhood, he'll make that his family.
Because you will follow an example.
Whether
it's a good one or not is left to be seen, but you'll follow an example. If the example was that my father was around to produce me because he has seed, but he's not in my life, he's not in the home, then I grow up with an example that I can do that same thing. Even if I don't like it, even if I hate it, that's the sad thing. You can have an abuser in the home and he was there, but he was abusive. And you hated it. You hated watching him abuse you or watching him abuse your mother, and you saw the abuse, and then you turn around and get married, and now you're the abuser, even though you hated it. We follow examples. That's why Jesus said, "Follow me." He gave a very direct, don't just follow everybody. No, I'm telling you specifically, follow me. Paul said the same thing. Follow me as I follow Christ. Fathers have to take that role. Christian fathers are to take that stance to say, I expect that you will follow me. So I'm going to teach you what that looks like to follow me. But you can be certain that I am following this example, not even necessarily the example that was in my own home. I think that's where it gets that's a gray area too, because we can hold our fathers kind of on a pedestal, and it's not that we shouldn't and have that honor for them. But to know, if we're looking for truth, what did dad do really good? Okay, I want to follow that example. But if he didn't necessarily get that right, whether by his admission, because some dads will just say, "I'm not good at that." Go ask your mom. I don't know about that kind of stuff. I don't know. There's things that dads will do to tell you, this isn't my thing. I'm not good at this. It doesn't mean you don't try. Even if you didn't do well at it, the trying in itself teaches a principle.
Absolutely.
To the kids, that I'm willing to try. I may not have this down, but we keep working at it. We don't just let it be what it is. We keep working at it. And the same goes for if he didn't do it at all, then I don't think, okay, then I don't have to. If we understand growth in life, we're literally growing and changing until we die. Now, our bodies may be breaking down, other than having a mental a disease that attacks the brain. You actually grow in wisdom, even if your body is decaying and getting older. You're getting wiser. You're getting smarter. You've figured some things out. I've heard it said that by the time you figure it out, you're too old to use it. So we have to pass it on. If I can no longer be doing these things, at least I can be teaching those who are in that way.
And that's why I love having these breakfasts with my dad. Because like I said, we talked about honoring the man. And I think I shared this with the class 2 or 3 years ago, because the fact that he's in his early 80s now, I can take him.
Yeah.
Physically, if grudge match, I'll put him in a hold, and
It's done.
my fear, respect for him, I'll never do that.
Right.
But what he's lost in his physical ability,
Mm-hmm.
the wisdom that I gleaned just from sitting there and talking to this man is just immeasurable. And I don't, I mean, now of course it's over Denny's. I'm thinking, Dad, can we pick a better place? But then because people say, why do you guys go to Denny's? Like, well, it's the halfway point between where we live, so we meet there. But it's not even the meal because, and I just thought it's not the physical food that I'm getting
Right.
because I do get physical nourishment from Denny's, but it's that spiritual nourishment, that food that I'm still getting from him,
Right.
from my age, that I try and pass on to my son still.
Right. Because you'll still have questions.
Yeah.
We're still, no matter what age we are going to be going down a road we've never been before.
Right.
That's what growth is.
Yeah.
You're going somewhere you've never been. And to be able to, and if I'm, getting ready to take a trip, I go online, I Google, where's this at? How are we going to get there? I make plans by looking how long are we going to be driving, or are we flying? There are preparations that I make knowing I'm headed in a particular direction. And as men and women, I think it's, especially children, if there's anybody who is 30 and younger who watches or listens to this, that you would understand that I would be the wise one. I can get there quicker, more easily, without all the road bumps and the problems that I've watched others face. Things that you think, ugh, I don't want my life to look like that, or
Right.
I hope I don't have to deal with that. Well, then you can make preparation not to go that way or
Right.
deal with that
Right.
by listening to those who have been down that road before and who know.
Yeah.
It's just simply wisdom to
wisdom.
listen to them.
It was, and that mean you have to listen to the same joke that Dad has told last 50 times.
Right.
But I laugh at the appropriate places every time. But all the other stuff that I get from him is like, man, this guy's still bringing it.
Yeah.
It's still bringing it, and I'm blessed by that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. That's good. Well, let me kind of dig into something here. Which one do I want to go with?
Just pick one. We'll just go.
Okay. Well, you gave me, as part of what you had looked at, you gave me Psalm 1, verses 1-6.
Okay.
Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. So I'll go ahead and read the whole passage, and then we can kind of talk about that. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. And there's a whole lot just right there. But his delight is in the law of God, of the Lord. And in his law, he meditates day and night. Before we say what the blessing is of that, this is really important instruction. I mean, David was a king,
Right.
a ruler
Yes.
of a lot of people
Yeah.
and a kingdom. And this is his wisdom being left, that he wrote in songs, but this was his wisdom.
Right.
And he's saying, there are certain ways that you can have a blessed life. There are certain things you can do that will lead to all the good things you want in life and keep you from the things that you don't want in your life. A man's man. This guy attacked a bear and won. He attacked a lion and won. He
Right.
took down Goliath single-handedly as a boy.
Right.
This was a man's man. Okay.
Yes.
He wasn't even allowed to build the temple because he had shed so much blood.
Right.
God was like, I love it that you want to. That's awesome. Make preparations, but I'm not letting you touch the holy thing because there's no way.
Just let you know, Jamie, you're my friend and I care about you. But if a bear breaks in here right now,
I'm toast.
I'll go get help.
Yeah.
You're going to figure it out.
Yes, exactly.
I am not David.
Yes. And yet that he is literally a real flesh and blood example that God saw fit to show us. He chose him to be a ruler because of these characteristics.
Yes.
He chose him to be able to teach mighty men. I mean, David had, this is funny to me because here you had your cousin. He spent time in prison. He's out now. Yay. And he's learned a lot. Yay. I'm so happy when there's a happy ending to these kind of things, when it could completely be different. But when David is running for his life because he is wrongly being chased out of just jealousy, pure jealousy, and feeling threatened, someone's insecurity is nailing him. And how many guys especially in the workplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many men in the workplace have somebody who's kind of after them, wants their position, wants their job, tries to make them look bad and embarrass them in front of, why? Because they feel threatened. They have an insecurity coming after you, but it's obviously you somehow look like an intimidating man to be envied, right? So there's the balance of understanding. If you're being attacked, that's the time to even more stand up, because obviously your strength is being seen.
Absolutely.
That's what's a threat. You're strong.
I love the fact that God used it, because we all know that David had some issues.
Yes. Yes. He did.
With taking another man's woman and
killing the man
and
taking her. Yeah.
But God looked at him and said, you know what? You're going to repent, meaning you're going to make a U-turn. You're not going to do that anymore, and I can still use you.
Right.
And what I was saying earlier, I tell my own kids, and I told my students, usually you can tell what someone's going to be in 5 years based upon three things: things you read, the things you listen to, and who you hang out with.
Right.
Do not counsel, do not associate. Now, sometimes you said to people, it's like, well, no, not me. It's like, why would you fight? Why would you fight that temptation?
Right.
If you're not someone who's into drugs or using cocaine, why would you go to a party where cocaine is?
Right.
It's like, oh, I'm strong enough, I'm not going to do it. It's like, okay, well, why are you even there?
Right. What benefit is that to you?
There's no benefit. So be careful what you read, be careful what you listen to.
Right.
And, I always talk about Cardi B's WAP. It's like, how is Dr. Seuss canceled, but yet that's on the airwaves? Right. It's the things that our culture is just turned upside down.
Right.
And most importantly, the people you hang with, the counsel you get, the advice that you get from people, be careful who you get that from.
Right. Because we're saying, okay, there might be plenty who are listening today who don't or did not have a father in the home.
Right.
There's only one remedy for that. And that's you become the father then. Yeah. You become the father, and you don't continue that legacy of that happening. You determine, then I'm not going to be that way, but I can't behave in the same way and expect a different result. So I'm going to have to do things differently. You mentioned, it's like, okay, those are the three things you can look at and know what kind of person it is. And Sean gave the exact same, Sean Kelly, when he was on the show, gave that same analogy. He says, I can tell by who you are based off of you. Basically, you are the sum average of the five closest people in your life.
Yes.
So you can tell me all day long you're not a drug dealer, but when all five of your friends are drug dealers, I'm sorry, but you're a drug dealer.
Right.
I mean, we even do this in the courts. Your cousin was obviously, he was there. You're kind of guilty by association. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time when you could have made the decision not to be there.
Right.
So that is still the accept responsibility. That's still on me. That's still my choice. And to be, and here's that, you said it. This is exactly what the scripture said. So blessed is the man who doesn't walk in the counsel of ungodly people. So you're not looking to get your wisdom from people who aren't themselves shown to be wise.
Right.
Just because all of your friends are saying, yeah, that's smart. Go do that. Right. Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Do they have a track record for you to even listen to what they're saying? Go to the ones, and it's not even who have wisdom, it's the godly or ungodly. So first, if you're trying to live a life that remotely looks like Jesus, then you have to go to people who actually have followed Jesus to first gain that wisdom to know this is the way it's supposed to look. Because today we've got everybody thinking that Jesus we're back in the days of the children of Israel. We've come out of Egypt and we're wandering in a desert and we're saying, we don't know what he looks like. Who is he? And we're making our own idol. Right. Well, my Jesus, I hear this all the time. My Jesus would never do that. My Jesus, my truth is, I don't get to pick.
Right.
He is who he is. He's not what this thing I can mold with my own hands. Scripture is pretty brutal in honesty when it tells you, look at how stupid you are. You craft this, you make this, you're the one who does it with your own hands. And then you're wondering when you pray to it, it doesn't do anything.
Right.
It doesn't have eyes that see, it doesn't have ears that hear. It can't do anything for you. You made it.
Yes.
So if you made it, it's going to do only what you made it to do, to sit there. That it's going to do nothing, whatever you can make is all you're going to get.
I love that term progressive, because it seems like we're advanced, but we haven't.
Right.
We're really just as dumb now as we were 2,000 years ago, where we think with all this technology and we can do certain things, but mental wise, we're still dumb.
We are.
And I get that a lot. And I told you before we started, I wasn't going to try and get too political, but there's some things that certain people will do is like, if you speak out against it,
right,
they're going to make you feel bad.
Right.
Like, oh, well, you're transphobic, or you're
right.
a racist.
Right.
And one thing that I got, and it makes me laugh, I've had people come to me based upon what happened last summer because of what I believe and what I think. And they'll look at me and you can kind of see them figuratively clutching the pearls on their chest and saying, you don't believe that Black Lives Matter? I'm like, if that is the most stupid, ignorant thing I've ever heard, because look at me.
I was just going to say, I'm Black.
I'm Black. And if anyone cares about his life, it is me. And
right.
yes, I care about my children's lives. I care about my sister's life. I care about my parents' life. Of course, I believe that Black lives and all lives matter,
right.
the way that Christ intended.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I have to go along with the ideology that you're putting forth. And I still want to know where all that millions of dollars what they raised, but no one wants to ask that question. Because if you ask that question,
yeah,
you're a racist, and they
to question. I mean, that's what we were saying earlier. Is it's almost, we have said blur every single line, so that no one knows the top from the bottom. If I was flying an aircraft and you take away the one thing that tells me if I'm facing up or down,
right.
That's life or death. I mean, that is life or death. If you take away the horizon line,
yes, I
will go crashing to the ground thinking I'm climbing.
Right.
And that is the mistake that we make. You take away these lines and these barometers, I will crash and burn thinking I was taking the high road. And we can be so convinced that because someone is clever, because their speech is clever.
Oh, we've learned we can over intellectualize sin like nobody's busy. You throw out the right words and throw out the right verbiage, you can make sin sound very attractive and very inviting.
Yes. Well, and in fact, scripture says it's actually fun for a season.
Oh, yeah.
It's just that the end will produce death. The wisdom is that, it will look this way for a little while. Right. Our pastor 2 weeks ago preached a message basically saying from the story that Jesus turned the water into wine. And then the governor says, you saved the best for last. And he said, most people, the governor of the wedding says, most people give the best first. And then you've drunk a while and they can give you less and less. He goes, he's just shown you how the enemy works.
Right.
He gives you the best right up front.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like how the drug dealer gives you the first stuff for free.
Yes.
And you think, wow, what a deal, know? And we go after those things because they're the shiny. I like my grandkids watch the Moana movie. And
I can't relate to grandkids.
Oh my gosh. So everything is about the song Shiny, right? Shiny, everything's shiny. And that's how they're drawn in and lured by those things that catch their eye, and they're being told, oh yeah, not a problem. Oh, this won't hurt you. It's just once. Oh, let's go hang out here. Oh, it'll be fine. Think of the people who have been killed in nightclubs when they should have never been there. And it would, wrong day, pick the wrong day to go. You probably knew in your gut, you didn't need to go there that day.
Yeah.
And now it's too late.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times God is such a father always to us that he is pricking us continually. I really don't want you doing that.
Right.
He's taking away a gray line for you. And it may be different for you than it is for me.
Right.
But he's saying, this is the way it's done with me and you. I'm saying this thing that you thought was, in the sand, when you can draw a line in the sand and then you just brush it and the line goes away, right? We've brushed the lines away.
Here now.
Yeah. And so God says, no, this is the line. I don't want you crossing this line.
Yeah. And
he's saying it for our protection because he knows what's on the other side of that line for you. And you might think that's not fair. Right. Look at so-and-so. They're doing okay. Right. They're over there on that side of the line. And that's not my kid.
Right. Yeah.
That's not my kid. Yeah. But this is where I want you, knowing, because he knows. It's not a guessing game with God.
No.
With us, it's a guessing game. I don't know tomorrow. Right. I have to walk by faith. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but he does. He knows my tomorrow. So if he knows that he wants good for me and he tells me, don't cross this line, because if you do, then such and such is going to happen, which leads to this, which is going to lead to this. This is where you're going to be. It's never going to be where you wanted it to be.
Right.
You can trust me. I'm a good guy.
I think most of we get to a point where we kind of know. Yeah. It's like, just this one time, I'm going to push it just a little bit. Mm-hmm. And regardless of our age, whether you're middle school or high school, or, our age, sin is fun.
Right.
I mean, look back to the Genesis account,
right.
Where Satan offered the fruit. And
it looks good.
It looks good.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Right. Right.
And then that's bringing that up. I mean, that was the inception of,
Right.
men abdicating their authority.
Right.
Because I tell my students all the time, it wasn't like Adam was some couple miles away. He was standing right there.
Right.
And then the Satan offered the fruit and says, well, take a bite. And she's like, what should I do, dummy?
Yeah.
He's like,
okay. Yeah.
Eat it.
Yeah. And that's a great point, Cedric, because in the garden, you said this phrase that he abdicated his authority. So when we don't stand, if men don't stand in their place of authority that they are given as the father, look what happened to his kids.
Right.
Very next that you have these two boys, one of them's doing okay, one of them's not doing so good, and they're fighting, they're arguing. He loses both sons eventually.
Right.
I mean, it's years and years later before they have Seth, but he basically loses both boys because he had lost his authority.
Yeah.
And that, again, we know that we're loved when we're disciplined,
yes,
when we're cared for, right? Mm-hmm. But if we don't have that authority, if we don't stay in the home, if we're not parenting our kids, if we're not stepping up to do that job, our kids are going to pay for it. It's not just going to be me paying in the way that I've lost some things, right? I've now made the price that has to be paid. My children have to pay that bill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why my father, I love the discipline that he offered. And there were times when he would tell me stuff or give me a spanking. And then I had that anger and that hatred toward him. Right. I was like, and I'm sitting there and I'm, the snot's coming out and I'm crying and everything.
Yeah.
And this man would have the nerve to come into my room 30 minutes later and say, let's go get some ice cream.
Yeah.
I'm like, what type of sadistic? What flavor? Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
But it's like, there wasn't like this heavy, dark cloud hanging over. He did what he had to do as a father.
Right.
He disciplined me.
Right.
But I still love you.
Right.
I still love you. This isn't a dark cloud over our day.
Right.
My mom was different. She was the nurturing part. Like me and my sister joke about this all the time. My mom was the talker. And so 30 minutes, half an hour, 90 minutes into the discussion, it's like, oh, will you please just spank me?
I know.
So we can move on with our day. Let's make this quick and be done with it. Oh, killing me.
Yeah, exactly.
But once if a father abdicates his authority, and then it passes down from line to line to line.
Right.
And so you got to make, I think you said that a couple of minutes ago, as a man, you got to draw that line.
Right.
And say, okay, maybe I didn't have that example in my home.
Right.
But, and as for me, my dad wasn't a big sports fan.
Yeah.
My dad's version of love was working two jobs. Mm-hmm. And so I was I left my own two devices. And I went out and played basketball. And I remember he came to one of my games, and it was the anti-example of how to shoot a basketball. But the fact that he was out there failing and having fun with it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to do this, but I'm having fun. And the elbow was out, and sometimes rebounds come right down, but I had to go chase it way down there because he missed so bad. But the fact that he was failing and having fun with me showed me a lot. But through my coaches and other teachers and other men in the church, I took little pieces from this one and that one and say, man, look at, they're walking in church and they're holding hands.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He always has his arm around her. And like a lot of guys, when you're in high school and college, you're on the phone with your girlfriend and she says, I love you. And you're like,
yeah. Is anybody see this?
I love you.
Yeah.
And then your friend's like,
yeah. Did you just tell her? Yeah.
And then there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's the way it should be.
Right.
And when you hear men who are really men, mm-hmm. look at their wives and say, I love you.
Right.
Or I make it a point once a week, because my one daughter is in Hawaii and the other one just moved out to Southern California. And I try and send them a minimum text once a week saying, you know what, you're beautiful. I love you, because they need to hear that from me.
Right.
Because I need to be the example of what they're looking for in men.
Right.
And so I'm always going on like something, you're beautiful, you're awesome, you're incredible.
Because if you're not telling them, they're going to look for somebody who will.
Yeah. And I don't want to go to jail, Jamie.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. And I don't want to have to visit you in jail.
We're doing the podcast in the jail.
I know. This is much easier to do it this way.
Oh, my hands on some other guy for mistreating my daughters.
Right.
Oh, geez.
Right.
But I set the example.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the prodigal son story, because there can be people who weren't the dad they needed to be, and they can start today.
Right.
And you can have a child who wants you to parent them and doesn't have it, or you can have a child who doesn't want you to parent them.
Right. Right.
And I feel like I see that whole dynamic in that story. The beauty of that story is when the son decides to come home, when he realizes it really is best with my dad.
Yeah.
To have this relationship is really the best thing for my life. When he realizes to come home, it says that his father saw him from afar off, which means what? It means his dad had been looking. Every day he was going out there looking. Is it today? Is he coming today? That the father's heart says, I'm always going after my son.
Right.
And when he comes, he literally runs to him, and it says he falls on his neck. You can just picture him wrapping his arms on him, his head going into his neck.
Yep.
I love you. I'm so glad you're home.
Yeah.
That understanding of a family dynamic, of the power of a father to restore, to tell him, here the son is like, I'm not worthy, Dad. I can't. Let me just serve. I'm just going to work for you. I'm just going to, I've been horrible. I'm a terrible son. And the father says, forget all that. Get him a robe, put some new clothes on this kid, put the ring on his finger, kill that calf. We're going to have a big old party and celebrate. He's home. That is the picture of our Father with us.
Absolutely.
Whether we have had that or not, we can have that.
Right.
Even if you don't have a father in your home today, and we're literally, that flew by. We are at 1 minute and 50 seconds.
Are we over time?
Yeah, almost.
Okay.
Almost
all
there.
right.
So, which is amazing. But that our Father has such a love for us. He's looking for us every day. He's saying, I do love you, even in the condition you're in.
Right.
I do want to set the example for you. I do want to give you my wisdom. I do want to be that strength and that safe place for you to come and run to. I do want to have. So if I didn't have it at home, I can at least have it with him. Right. And I do have a couple scriptures where God promises.
I know I jotted down a few
very
too,
things.
But if we don't get to it, we'll have to do a 3-parter.
I know, we totally can. We totally can. Psalm 68:5 says, a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling. That was beautiful to me, that he's not only, if you don't have a father, he's going to be your father.
Right.
And even if you're the woman, you've been left, you're by yourself. You don't have a man in the home to help you with whatever it is that you need help with, that role is missing.
And that's important, Jamie, because today, 2021,
right,
we have to ignore the culture where the feminists say you don't need a man.
Right. Then obviously God is saying you do, because that's what I'm promising to be.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, one of my, and I'll say it, one of my heroes, Candace Owens, strong. She's a very strong woman.
Right.
And she said nothing brings her more pleasure than making her husband a sandwich.
Yeah.
And that's been several bits, like she's out there and she's impacting lives and she's talking to people and she's changing the world one video at a time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she goes, I love being a mom and I love being with my husband.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make me a weak woman.
Right.
That doesn't make me a submissive woman. But culture will tell you,
right,
don't be submissive to your man. You're a woman. Do your thing.
Yeah.
Do you, girl.
And that's the sad part too, because we touched on this before we started the recording, but that when Adam was created, Eve was not created out of dust the way that Adam was.
Right.
Eve was taken out of Adam. So Adam actually had Eve in him, but in order to partner and to do this and not stand alone, because God said it wasn't good for him to be alone, he took her out of him. Yes. So the completeness that they feel is when they're together. All of a sudden, everything's like, that feels so much better. That works.
Yeah.
That piece that was missing, I have. Not to say that when we're in a single season or when we're doing something, whether by choice or it's been put on us, we can't control if it's been put on us. But there's still that understanding that I need it. That's why we reach out to God then.
Exactly.
And whether I am the man, I still need my Father's example. I still need Jesus to disciple me, to discipline me, to show me the way I should go so that I can walk in that kind of strength.
Right.
That's something I want. That's something that I crave. As a woman, I know for me, I don't want the role that my husband has. As much as the world wants me to want it, I don't want it.
Right.
I want the role that I'm created to fill. And that might look different for every woman. You might be someone who is really business savvy. You could be, and you're supposed to do that. That's fine. Do that. But that doesn't mean that you are whole and think completely all by yourself and have no need of another.
Like I told your son and other basketball players, I said, be a star in your role.
Yes.
You may not average 30 a game. Right. That's okay. Yeah. That's not your role.
Right.
But whatever you do, whatever your role is, be a superstar in that role.
Right. And we can encourage fathers today, that very thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be like a superstar dad.
And you have to go to him. Like I always tell, like I like to tinker with stuff, not very effectively. Like when things break down, like, I'll fix it. And then I start thinking to myself, like, okay, there's one of two ways to figure out how something works. You could read the manual, which is Christians. We know what the manual is.
Right.
Read the book. Or if you have the capability, you ask the creator.
Right.
Like, hey, what did you design this to do?
Right.
And we have that in our manual as Christians. We can go to the Bible and ask our creator, like, what did you design the family unit to look like?
Right.
What did you design men to look like? What roles are they supposed to have? Not what is said on TV or said on the music, but what did you design it? Because you created all this.
Right.
So you must have had some idea.
So you know how to make this home.
Best.
Yeah.
But we choose to do it. And like me, when I put things together, it's like, we didn't need those 30 extra pieces. They were just extra anyway.
Yeah.
We'll do that later.
Yeah.
But this was good. We probably didn't get to as much as we wanted to.
Well,
so I'll have to come back another time.
You'll have to come back another time. We'll have to
continue
okay with this conversation.
That's okay with your guests. I would love to do that.
Absolutely. We would love
I know my teeth can be obnoxious sometimes.
Well, the podcasters don't know anything about your teeth.
Okay, that's true.
He has a beautiful smile for those who are only listening.
God created me. It's like, let's give him extra teeth.
I love it. Well, let me just say that we appreciate so much that you have joined us today to be a part of this conversation, and we will continue it again so that we can dig more into this subject. But if you are somebody who is looking for a father, if you are a father and you're looking to be a better father, can I just encourage you today? We've said it multiple times. I know that this is like beating a dead horse, really, but the truth is the truth. And you will find the truth in the Word of God. You will find the answers that you're looking for if you'll seek the one who did create it all. He does know how to make this work for you. He knows how to fix what's broken. He knows how to make work from things that are missing, from the pieces that you seem to not have. He's the missing piece. He knows how to make that come together and how to work. So I just encourage you to spend some time. Ask the Lord. Prayer is something that looks different on each one of us, but spend time talking, listening to what the Lord would say, letting his word speak to you, letting him show you his character, the way that he thinks about things from the word, and allow him to mold you into the person that you want to be and help you deal with the one that maybe isn't doing what they should be doing, how to handle that situation, how to move forward, how to maybe be like the prodigal son or the father of the prodigal son. There's a way that we can behave that can help us. There's a way that we can take that will nurture and produce that good thing that we're wanting in those results for our lives, for our children's lives, and all those that we affect. Even like Cedric, with all those students that he still affects, the people that he reaches through social media and whatnot. And that's the ability we have to us. None of us is stuck right where we are. We do have a way to move forward and to gain ground and take our authority and live in the blessing that God has for us. So I just thank you so much for visiting with us today and listening to this conversation. I do ask that if you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe and share. others hear what the message is today, and those who may be, you know, that you have friends and people in your life that you know this is something they need to hear and have a conversation maybe themselves. I just ask you to share that with them and let this be a blessing to those that you know. God bless you. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.